Hi, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well, wherever you may be. I have a few questions. We're always in need of questions, so thank you very much for those who do send them in. I really appreciate them. I know it's difficult sometimes to formulate a question, and there's all kinds of things like people think that their questions aren't as good as other people's and all that kind of thing. That to me doesn't matter at all. It may matter to you, but it's maybe a good thing just to try and figure out what might be interesting or where your need is, and then try and send that in. We're not trying to outdo anybody with questions. Uh, Hopefully, one of the areas where we don't have to worry about that might eventually be uh, a less competitive engagement with what needs to be asked or all that sort of thing. And I don't think some of these questions are lovely, so I don't think there's any competition there. So those of you who don't ask them, please don't worry about them. Just and if you prefer, I I won't give your name, but you have to put it down there. Don't give my name. Okay. Anyway, because your questions are also the questions possibly of others as well who can't quite uh, put pen to paper or uh, it tells you our ages are slightly different from time to time, but can't type them in. Anyway, here we go. This one is from Carol Thompson. We had a UK seminar last weekend, and of course, we didn't have quite time for their questions, so all of their questions. So this one was left over, and it's a lovely question. So here we go, Carol. Your talk last Thursday provoked some questions re love. As a therapist, I feel I strove to give that unconditional love within my work and being real, real congruent, consistent. And once again, let me do the question first. However, there have been a few occasions in my life where I was most vulnerable on the receiving end, in brackets, and others showed me what kindness or love really looks like. The most humbling was when I was totally alone in India. No one at my back, and three members of a staff at the hotel that she was staying in came to the hospital where Gordon, her husband who passed, was to give their blood for him. In other words, they volunteered their blood for him. I was shocked and overwhelmed by their offer. Later, I tried to repay them, knowing these people had very low pay. They refused my gift. Now I see them before me, in her mind and in her heart, smiling and saying no and handing back the envelopes, kindly, continually kindly smiling at me. Here now, feeling incredibly small and insulting. Yeah, we don't really understand sometimes the motivations of some people and their kindness. And so lessons learned, and in India especially, they would understand that to be engaging with others in the kindest way they could, and that would be helpful in their karma. Also, their motivation would be sincere, and that is called selfless act of love, which is totally different than setting up a a plan and going about doing something for the good of yourself, kind of thing, which is often what can happen. This is, I, Nofa said, totally vulnerable, was able to feel this act of love. And this is a personal part, so I won't. And she felt it was very honest, loving, and true. In my previous life, I strove to be congruent, that as a therapist. However, in this moment, there was another take on real. In other words, it's like my underbelly was revealed. Never was I more in the moment, like a child, thankful as I was being watched over. You know, many people ask about this concept of love from a higher state. It is something that is not personality based. And when we're engaging with love, we do our very best to have that personality based. Excuse me. Marlene, could you get me some water, please? And sometimes we might even succeed to some degree in thinking that we were, at least from our perspective, creating an act of love. This is very difficult for us to understand because, in fact, thank you very much, many acts of love are really acts of engagement to allow the personality to feel credible in the eyes of others. This is a different kind of thing that Carol is talking about. This kind of interaction creates a transmission internally that affects the solar plexus, but also affects the heart center. And where there's a moment of perception that relates directly to not the personality, but an inner aspect of the personality as if it's seeing itself and is, in a kind of a way, vulnerable to the recognition of something given that is profound and beyond the giving of one person to another as a gift, even. It's very difficult to explain. So I am wondering, Carol says, now how do we draw closer to that most vulnerable, really real part of us, of ourselves, so that it is available to ourselves and others in love and compassion, without, of course, being in a bad place? This is a dilemma for us. Allowing ourselves to actually be soft enough inside is not sitting back and then coming out verbally with an expression that relates to softness. But that's a biased kind of thing, and also an impressing. Many people do this to impress other people, all the rest of that stuff. This is not what Carol is asking about. And of course, the person who's doing this doesn't know probably that they're doing these kinds of things for their own self-interest. Their own self-love is basically what it is. Our dilemma is that we, counter to how people think they understand biases, we have a great love for ourselves the way we are. And you can prove that to yourself by your engagement with your own defenses about a whole bunch of stuff. Ideas, ideals, all kinds of things, actions, whatever. And you did that because blah, 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 blah. That's all. Yeah, sure. Okay. But this is not what these people did. And it's not what Carol felt inside. She felt the movement of a flow that had no ambiguity about it. It had no bias about it. It had nothing but kind of making her feel vulnerable, which is not what people like. So I gave you a little bit of a hint there. How much can we allow ourselves to perceive in relationship to understanding, first of all, ourselves in a fashion that's neither negative or positive, but just recognizable from our biased perspectives. This is very difficult for us because we don't do this well, but we, from time to time, can. But it is a difficult thing for us and where we are in our inner development or evolution, as some might call it. So there's a strong sense of emotion in this. I know, a sense of emotion in this. It also is in the mind, but it is so pulled back within our emotion, where it's as if it's so different that we've got nothing in our minds for a few seconds that can protect us, that can assert a certain value to us. It is just a sense of that inner loving that has nothing in it that came from us. Absolutely zero. And it's wonderful. Superlatives used to vocalize this are maybe used by others in relationship to how they believe it should be spoken about. But the actual occurrence has no perfect words, because you're flooded with a kind of loving that is not related to what you've experienced. And this is very difficult, because I'm looking at the question, wondering how do we draw closer to that most vulnerable, really real part of ourselves, and real part of others, whether you like them or not. Because that part in them you would love. The way they express their engagement with how they believe they need to be valued, not so much. But then your engagement with even a response in that is related to how you see the world as well. We all, as personalized beings, are involved with that. So as a biased individual, you have an opinion about people, and you share that opinion with others. A real deep sense you can't share with others. So here's some couple of things. I don't know whether you think they might be of interest, Carol, or not. First of all, it's an emotion. Attempt it the best you can, and to remember what they did to help, and that sense or that moment where you saw that it was not about them acquiring anything. It was about them giving themselves. Giving has many faces. Some are selfless, and some are selfish. The best you can, you be gentle with that and try to remember that. And that's one aspect. Kindness, respectful of others, is not an act to get a reward. Yeah, fine. All right. I'm not saying that to Carol. I'm saying it to everybody. Carol knows that. She's already experienced that, as some of us have been lucky enough to do so. And try your best not to be in awe of it, because awe is an act of bias. Try to be right with it and understand it the best you possibly can, because it is difficult to understand if you haven't had the experience. When you have the experience, you can't forget it, but it's difficult to describe because it becomes all words in the description. That's the difficulty with loving. We have a tendency to want to describe it. And internal loving is beyond description. We do the best we can with what we've got. We have personalities, and they have tendencies to be the way they are because we've cultivated them that way. Not about having a better one or worse one, but we act that way. And it's because our ability to trust and love is focused more often towards our view of the world and our view of whatever. And our view is loved by us. It's all we can do right now. In our Western versions, often it's also in the East too, especially in this century, it's getting stronger. Often have a hook. We have a hook you give to get something. It's not like that. You give because there's no option but to do that. Because that loving engagement is uppermost. It's not about acquiring anything. It's about maintaining a relationship with something beyond the personalization, yet internally, deeply embedded within that personalization. See how difficult, from my perspective, it is to speak about. One thing you can do is think about higher state levels and try to trust that there is such a thing. It's just very difficult in our world now. We're so, let's say, we have a mental framing that is consistent right in the core of our structure about the importance of how we interact with the world and how we can influence the world based on our successes, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, we want to be recognized for the successes that are basic opinion most of the time. And it's hard for us to consider options beyond what people figure out must be, because that's where the world is. We're still engaged with our ABCs of understanding. No offense to anybody. Our link with that higher stage is difficult to trust because we don't trust anybody other than us. Now, I said it. Is that true? Well, sometimes it is. Often, many find that the only way that they can make sense of anything anybody else says is if they say it exactly in the words that they would use. Interpretation is unbelievable, but it's consistent everywhere. Until you meet folk who don't have that in them as much. They still have it in them, but not as much. And their awareness is to look for the subtle within another. In other words, the old Christian or Hindu or Buddhist orientation, you can see the love in another. Yes, you can see the love of their own self-interest. Yes, you can see that's where they can only be. Yes, you can see the love of a deeper level that has nothing to do with their self-interest. And that is the love that fires in such a gift that was given for Carol's husband, Gordon. So one thing you might try if you're open to it, you've got to do this in a humbling way, and this may be not something you can do. Say, I love you to it, that higher state, over and over and over again until it interacts with you. That sounds strange. Mm-hmm. Very strange. But not as strange as when it interacts with you. So in the meantime, since you do find it strange, you'll be saying it in a manner that relates to how you interact with you. Not with it, with you. So you'll have an inner version of what that would be, and you'll be proud of it and how you did it this way and that way and that way, and how it did work or did not work. And you'll have a discussion about how it worked. It's not it. But if that's the place we have to be for a while, then that's what we should do. Because that will help you to see you, understand you better. Your fear, your relationship with being outdone, out this, out that, not as important as some blah, 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 blah. If that's all you have, that's what you have to do until you can see it. In this particular case, there was an inner trust that was perceived with those beings because they gave of themselves with nothing, no need to even speak any words. A very different place. Wonderful that you had that experience, Carol. And you hit it on the nose. Never was I more in the moment like a child, thankful I was being watched over. An amazing experience. Thanks for the question. Here's another one by Toshi. Toshi, I'm not sure if I handled this question before. Sometimes, and this is a second one on Way of Hermes. And this was a quote: "When you are ready to become a stranger to the world, I shall bestow it upon you." That oneness that we were talking about, in a place where you're in an engagement with a higher state, and you realize that there's no one else around you that is in the same state in a particular moment. But the loneliness of that is huge, because in fact, the concept of a stranger to the world is a lonely position to be in, with no one, and it's humbling. There's no one that you can engage with and speak about that which is in you, especially if you are a person who's not talking about how you see yourself. That is not even on the table. How valuable you are, how this or that we are, and our location in the scheme of things, all of that stuff. That's not what this is about at all. It is an active engagement with a higher state. In fact, some of the terminology in the Way of Hermes was the terminology relative to the time of interpretation and it being written. So Toshi goes on and says, "It seems to come back to the question that we've been discussing for a while. Are we able to do what we know inside is good for us to do? Are we willing to become a stranger to what is holding us back?" I look at it from a different kind of point of view. I think we are cultivating a system, Toshi, where ultimately we will be able to handle the softness, the relentless loving, the relentless focal point on just being in a place where that link within us, that higher state, can express itself, and we do not interfere with that expression. In other words, interference is even drawing attention to it. But you can't teach this any other way but allowing yourself to recognize that the preferred position of the biased personality is quiet, because this is not normal in our world. And if it is quietness, it's assumed that you have nothing to say, because our engagement with our world is one of entertainment. One thing I look through all the time, of course, I was brought up in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, 70s, like starting to be like anyone else. And the entertainers, as we were talking the other day, but they're making more money than people who are in charge of nations. It's kind of a misunderstanding we have about what value really is. Personalizations are considered valuable. The more you yell, the more you assert, the more you're considered of value. Not really real, but It's the programming that we are buying into and have bought into over the last 40, 50, 60 years. Are we willing to become a stranger to that, to what is holding us back? Most always we're biased. Most always, unless we have a link up at that level. If we're fortunate, we'll see it eventually. And then maybe we can pull back a little. If not, ultimately, we may learn from it. But we will defend it because that's what we do. And this is what we have. And that's what we're trained to do. There's no negation there except that it holds us from deepening our relationship with something beyond ourselves. At the same time, we're using that energy that's in us for our own purposes. You'll see as time goes on, it will increase the fervor of your secret bias. If you want to be the king or queen of the world, it'll show up and you won't even notice that it's happening. It's really difficult to deal with. It doesn't mean anybody's bad or good. It means that's where you are and you're not willing to take a look at something different. Because the key is you're growing through you. It's sad when we don't see that stuff. But it's not bad. It's just you can't see the very thing that is holding you in a position for a purpose so that you can learn from you. And this is a key thing. And perhaps learn from others who have those, let's say, tendencies. But you've got to let yourself care beyond the biases, beyond how you think life has to be right versus wrong, good versus bad. It's just talking into the wind for most of us. Go slow. Be patient. Being relatively humble is a good thing. It opens your eyes more. Acting humble doesn't do it. And that is, in a nutshell, I have some other stuff here. When this soul was talking to this individual, Hermes, are you willing and ready to become a stranger to the world? Are you willing to be different? Not act different, be different. This is very difficult. If so, I'll help you. That's what it says. I'll bestow it upon you. That will make you nervous, that's for sure. Because you'll try to get back in your old skin. And the skin is perforated. You can't get back in there the way you were. So you'll attempt to cultivate a different way. Because that's the nature of how you were developed in the first place. As a personality, I mean. Because we need something here to maintain a kind of engagement, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So that we can understand others and recognize our relationship with those things in this species. We love what limits us self-love, our deference in our world is personally biased at this stage. We defer to us. That's our deference. And it implies that we are of greater value than somebody else. In the long run, that higher aspect is involved with every race, every belief system, every interaction, everywhere. So we will not like that statement for still quite a while. We can speak it, but we cannot live it well. One day, we may be looking for that love in another, no matter what they look like. And if we can, that will stimulate an acknowledgement within us that we have known it. It's not about seeing the personality bias and then speaking about how they are mean, miserable, or whatever they happen to be. It's more like, that love is there in the form of self-love, but it isn't recognized as such because it's difficult to do so. This is such a good question. Yes, it does imply that we will get help, but can we see it? We need to be able to see the help we get. And it's as if it's projected in you and through you. You express yourself in a certain way, and you believe that way is the right way to express yourself. But there it is. It's trying to show you this is not necessarily the best way to express yourself. Sorry, we can't hear that too well. And this is the implication of this stranger in this world. And once again, this concept of being alone in that is worrisome to others and to you if you happen to ever get there. And I'm not sure if I can read this. Sorry. Our inner development images are what we believe are the only us available to us. We must deepen our awareness to do so. To become a stranger is to know what is occurring inside another and not hurt them in their inability to be loving other than self-loving. All they can do, that is all they can do. The stranger link is to become at one with a wisdom beyond the personality's continual development. And this in itself is difficult to understand. I'm trying to think of an example. The image I'm getting is a person standing on a hill overlooking a huge valley, but up there probably about 400 meters or so, quite a long way. And this sight takes your breath away. And you can't remember 10 seconds ago or 10 or an hour and a half or 2 hours ago when you were down there in a village in the Alps, for example. you are so overcome with the beauty of how things are in this 1 second. You've forgotten everything. Nothing is in your mind. You have that sensation of a glow or a love that is inside you. And you're looking at it and relating it to the beauty that you're able to allow yourself to perceive. And you're all alone. No one else at that second is doing the same thing. And that 1 second begins to stay with you forever. Are you ready to become a stranger to the world? If so, I shall bestow it upon you. Total different understanding. It's just a biased example. And I'm sure it falls short. I have another question here. Thanks again, Toshi and Carol. Another question here. I answered this a little bit with, it's a Peggy Moore question from North Carolina. But it seems to me like it's linked up to the last two questions a bit. So, Ron, can you talk to us about how the physical realm impacts and interacts with other levels of our being? And you see where the dovetail is a little bit. For example, what we do, say, think, in our physical, mental, or emotional body sets in motion actions and reactions that occur beyond our physical awareness. Yeah. Stopping right there, let's see, how do those actions affect the astral, causal, and etheric realm? These are words. Look, it's my understanding. And I would say experience to some degree that our interaction, physically, emotionally, and mentally, affects the core of how a person, you, I, and 8 billion people learn how to enter into an understanding of how to act here on these planes. It's a little bit broader than that because there have been people before in our world, rare as they may be, in every age who have contributed a little more ability to engage with the core of how we are born into this world, what limits we are engaged with, so that the species itself can grow. It is relative to the species. Each one of you contribute daily pieces of difference relative to how you normally function. For example, if you normally function in a certain way, and over a period of time, let's say you were more aggressive, then over a period of time, you have learned that that isn't helpful, yet it's hard to do something with it. That's a piece of information that is logged into the species. Wherever that is, wherever it shows up, all of us have chances to 1, 10 chances to 1 have all been aggressive at some time in our lives relative to some bias we believe has to be real because we're the ones who believe it. That last part is part of the species. Each individual has a piece of that. Even a parent. A parent will say, do things this way and you're okay. Do them any other way, it's not okay. It will be hurtful to you. And it may be true, it may not be true at all. But parents do the best they can, only with what they have to inside to help with or engage with. And they have options that are not always pleasant to their children. And the children grow up to be the same way, not very pleasant to their children. All the time? No, not necessarily, but often. So your parents have your back, or create a back that you should have in life, according to them. Not often consciously, often unknowingly. Besides that, you have a bias early on, real early, and you assess and judge your parental background as well. It's what happens. It's not any different than anybody else. Our dilemma here is we affect the core. People born into this plane relate to this plane, generally speaking, how this plane is being related to in the past. How does it affect the emotional system or the astral system? We still have beings with shells in the astral form that are vibrating based on how they were when they were here, and it may be very constructive. We have had wars too, and courage, and people who cared for each other, and that's called love, in case you're wondering, and people who didn't care for each other. That's called self-love, and they were in opposition. So we have an engagement with what we know is right, a willfulness that validates us. And we don't like to have it pointed out. But it's true of all of us on these planes. Some can use this will to be of tremendous service, and you will never know who they are, because they will be doing what they can to help the core of these planes. Acting like you're helping the core of these planes is not helping the core of the planes. It's giving to the core of the planes, whatever it is whatever your strategy is in relationship to how you want attention for functioning in a certain kind of a way. People do this unconsciously, and some people do it very consciously. That's part of the species. That isn't nervous enough for anybody listening. Recognize also that some of the things that you shift and change, that willingness or the ability to allow it to occur that way, becomes part of the species as well. These other beings like Jesus or a Buddha or St. Francis or some other person that you've never heard of before, someplace along the line, and many of them, that willingness, that need to do that is still in the astral plane. So how does that help us? And it's linked up to a higher state. How does that help us? Well, if you're in an honesty within yourself, a sincerity within yourself, don't have to tell anybody. As a matter of fact, you're better off if you don't. Otherwise, you use it in other lives. If you are in that, stay with it. Ask for help from those vibrations that are, or those energies that are beyond the biased community's vibrations. I say, yeah, sure, that's not the highest of all vibrations, one bias could say to another. But it is a link that's already there. And that may help you to begin to understand deeper your relationship with how you function and do small, little, tiny things. As the old saying is, do small acts of kindness toward yourself by attempting to understand you, by attempting to pull back, attempting to see those things that are there every day for you to see. And don't judge them. Don't negate them. Help them. That will change the core. And that will touch a deeper engagement with a single being called human beings. We'll still have intentions, views that are, let's say, on the edge of or filled with self-interest, because self-interest is already there. It's kicked into our system. But over time, it may be able to be softened by those who are willing to allow themselves to be helped beyond the interest that is called self-interest. It's very difficult for us. This is not an easy kind of thing, but it is internally real, as you heard in relationship to Carol's question. I just made a couple of comments. I don't know whether they'd be interesting. These actions are assertions that emphasize and construct images that we believe will underline how we must be considered by others. These are actions that are related to things that might be helpful to kind of let go of. But at the same time, we're also trying to make our way, each one of us, in such a way as to be helpful, not only to ourselves, but from time to time, we try to help with others, realizing at the same time that they grow through them. And they're attempting to help themselves at the same time. And these personalized images, if we could see them, would enable us to know ourselves better without the judging. Not to judge them then, but to see how and why they are also our way of learning. They're involved with our way of learning, as well as where we are. They show us where we're vulnerable. We believe sometimes that we're tremendously valuable by this intense engagement with being a certain way. And that's our vulnerability. It holds us in a position, like Toshi was asking, of value because we're nervous and afraid. There's a fear quality to it. If we change, what will we change into? Well, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. You know, no one is telling you to do that. But if you do it, you will perceive you and you will learn about others and their vulnerability as well as your own. Because it's important to know that you have vulnerabilities. Because others are defending theirs just like you're defending yours. That kind of thing. And that's how it affects the physical realm as well, Peggy, as well as the causal orientations. Try to see them as positive. If you see something inside yourself, say, oh my goodness, this helped me up to now. Now I can see it may not be as helpful as I thought it might be. And you will find how difficult that is to shift or change something inside. For all of us have found this to be true. It gives us a deeper understanding of our personal needs, our fears, our hopes, and our vulnerability and the vulnerabilities of others, as well as ourselves. So I'm in agreement with Peggy. She says, already I can hear you telling us to soften and to balance. I'm also thinking we need to light map in these reactions. I would say for sure that using energy on energy is helpful. If you do that, ask that that energy that comes into you be helpful so that you can continue to grow in a manner that will be slow and consistent in relationship to an engagement with higher states or the purpose of relating to higher states and the purposes of higher states, if that made any sense to you at all. I think we're in and around the time when we have to meditate. I have 2 questions left, and we'll try to deal with them next Thursday the best we can. I really would appreciate any questions that you might send in, and I'll try and get to them as quickly as I possibly can. One thing I will say, I'm thinking of taking July and August, just a break in July and August, and give you guys a break too. However, some weeks I will be able to do a Thursday night, and some weeks I will not, but we'll let you know as we go along. I'm looking forward to the seminar in September.
July.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. In July and September. Please take care of yourselves. Good night. We're going to do a meditation now. Okay? Here we are. Now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. Good night, everybody.